Okay, I'm here once again with Jason from Two Bit Podcast. And I never say your last name because I'm always afraid I'm going to screw it up. So if
It's
you want
it's
to,
actually much more simple than people think. It's
it
Chuck.
Miranchuk. Okay. Yeah. I'm always like overthinking it. I'm not going to say the last name. I don't
You can go Rick. We can go like all Kiev on this shit and go Chuk, but no
know.
one says that, so it's just Chuck. It's fine.
All right. All right. But yep, here we are once again. And we're not going to read today. I think we're going to put that off till next month. We're going to get in chapter 2 next month.
Sure.
It's just been Lent, I think is affecting both of us in very similar ways, very similar fashion. So sometimes it's nice to just sit and have a conversation. And so that's what we're going to do. And I had started doing some podcasts on the community of orthodoxy
Mm.
in the community within a church. And you know, I orthodoxy is very pertinent for very many reasons in my life. Even though I'm probably like much less faithful than I should be in the pursuit of salvation. I It's given me this kind of a link or a foundation, maybe an anchor to other people. I'm very much kind of like uh, a hermit in kind of the way I do things. I'm very introverted. I'm perfectly happy sitting on my front porch watching the grass grow and watching my chickens run around and doing nothing else and not having any interaction with other people. And I think that's a lot of that is years and years of being alone in a truck on the road. Um, audio books up, my only friend, and so it's working retail and then also being involved in a church has given me sort of an anchor to other people and the way that other people live their lives, the way that other people feel, the struggles that they're dealing with on a daily basis, and not being so self-absorbed and within myself. Yet I feel that there's a place within orthodoxy for that, for you to crawl into your mind space and and become comfortable within your own skin. And that's like the noose. That's where the Jesus prayer takes place. That's where you find that reflection on God. And so I think there's this balance that we need to find between the community and being dedicated to that community, which is what I have the hardest trouble with, and finding that dedication to that inner reflection and that self-reflection and being within yourself.
Yeah, there's a lot there. Um, I'm not part of a church community down here because there isn't one.
Right.
Um, and I have to get my license and cars figured out and all that stuff so I can get up to Perth. That's a me problem. There's a lot of like me problems that I could list off as they sound as excuses. They're partly excuses. They're partly just things that I don't know, I've avoided. I said to my mother-in-law a few months ago something to the effect of, I could just spend all day in my head and be happy. I don't really need other people. Like I need my wife and my child. Like, when my daughter wakes up and she runs to me and gives me a hug, that's just joy.
Mm.
But other than that, um, like everything else, like work and people and that kind of thing. My background is 25 years or more in the hospitality industry, which I just kind of got back into, and yeah, I'm just I deal with people for money. That's my job. you know I don't like doing it when I don't have to. um so so there's always that element to it. I just had this thought. I sent this to Erickson a few days ago. I get these little, the noose kind of gets, my noose is muddy and sometimes gets cleared, and that's where I get these little inclinations, these
Mm-hmm.
inspirations.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I was thinking about is that, so I'm thinking about like left and right and these distinctions and how really they're just categories to describe certain kinds of people who are more like something than not, right? And we've of course made it very political and formed whole political parties and institutions and yada 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 ideologies around these things, but essentially it's just kind of categories of being. And one of the so I was kind of thinking of that dichotomy and like thinking that um left wing people, let's say, are a general category of people who wish to become something. um they wish to imbibe, they want to consume and be and become the thing. Whereas a right wing person, I think, wants to materialize them something, wants to build it, to make the icon or the symbol.
Mm-hmm.
And in the church, you have the church combines both. So uh, we have the Eucharist, which is literally consuming the body of Christ symbolically, and you have the icons, people who make the icons, the actual, you know, iconography of Christ. And these two things are brought into harmonious um, uh, being within the church. And that's kind of what community has to be. Community can't be this, you're this, I'm that. Uh, it, there's a respect of persona. There's a respect that you, Tommy Salmons, and me, Jason Marinchuk, are two separate people, but we are combined in our faith, and we can be combined if we were living in the same town and building the same kind of community, or whatever word you want to use. That gives us purpose. So when we are redeemed, when Christ redeemed us, the redemption gave us purpose, and that combined purpose is what we need to come together and work together with.
Mm-hmm.
Something that's bigger than ourselves, that's something that's higher than ourselves, and something that is going to go on longer than ourselves. These things are necessary. This is the cure for nihilism, I think. This is the cure for the vengeful son, something I've talked about now. We're talking to Semigog this coming Friday, the April 27th. People listening to this, wherever that was, go check it out.
Yeah.
But I think that, in my way of thinking of it, the vengeful son is, to use a Jungian term, the vengeful son spirit is sort of the shadow of the
Devouring mother.
no of the prodigal son.
Oh,
Right,
okay.
he's
Okay.
the vengeful son is the offspring of the devouring mother, but he's really just the inversion of the prodigal son.
Gotcha.
And Jesus' story of the prodigal son, the son
Well,
who,
like
through his
Cain.
pride, yeah, in some ways, yeah. But the prodigal son, Cain is much more of a specific story. Most of us haven't killed our brother, but a lot of
Right,
us,
but I think about like Cain was the one who built the first city, right? And
right,
and the metropolis, the it's like
the
when you have
civilization. Yeah, Cain built
well,
civilization.
it was not even civilization. It's like when you have more of something, if you want to go like Austrian economics, right? If you the more you have of something, the less it's worth, right? So you pack these small regions with a multitude of humanity, therefore humanity is valueless.
See, my counter as to that is pulling on land, which Oren McIntyre and I talked a little bit about. Nick Lands said that again, to paraphrase, that capital is a result of competency. So when human competency basically creates capital, if you have enough human competency,
Hmm.
you get better and better at doing things, and so you'll have more of it, or be able to produce more of it, just or more value. Or airplanes is a good example, right? Like the first airplane is really costly and difficult to build, but as you build more and more of them and people become better and better at doing that, then you have the airline industry, right?
Right. And that's what
Which
I'm saying. If you look at like I mean, you could say airplanes or you say like televisions, right? Or like flat screen
whatever.
TVs,
Yeah,
whatever. Like when they first started making them, they were like outrageously expensive. And the more that they dialed in that technology, the technology became less expensive, and you ended up with more of it because it became less expensive. And it can, and that's what I'm saying. Like
sure.
if you pack five, like in New York City, let's say you got 8 million people packed into this small region, like the you don't you don't value the human life around you as you would out in the country, right? Because it's rare to see humanity out in the country, and therefore when you see somebody, you're like genuinely happy to see them. But if you're in a city like a big metropolitan city, then you don't respect that humanity. You're not happy to see them. You don't want to be around them. You know, most of the time you're inconvenienced by the sheer number of the amount of people around you. That's kind of what I'm saying.
I mean, you can make the argument that no one should actually live in cities. That cities
I
should
do
be
make that
almost,
argument.
yeah, that cities should exist because I think they're good suppositories of competency. They're vessels of competency, and also a symbol of civilization itself. It's where you put your museums, where you put your great works, where you people go, right,
Mm,
to see, to be awed a little
mm,
bit by the magnificence of this culture and civilization. But to actually live in it, yeah, it presents a whole bunch of problems. And I think that's where neighborhoods were. Like when I grew up in Montreal in the 80s, we grew up in a blue collar, mostly blue collar, very immigrant, all the old men sitting on porches, a mixture of Eastern Europeans and Italians and Portuguese, mainly. And, but there was a sense of community there, maybe not as robust as in times past, but there was a sense of shared identity within the street, within the area, and then the greater identity of the city, and then the greater identity of the province and of the country itself. Um, we begin, I think, it's like it's funny when I listen to a lot of the Con Inc. guys talk about nuclear families and all that stuff, and I'm thinking that's kind of what led to a lot of the problems. Like you began to split family into units, and those units then went and lived elsewhere, uh, dividing the family. So you didn't see your cousins or
mm.
your brother. You saw them on holidays, but you didn't like live on the same street or in the same building or the same house, or you're beginning to stretch that family further and further into the suburbs or into other places with this kind of idea of like this and it was basically just a big Ponzi real estate scheme.
Yeah, to
um
create, well, and also to create the perspective that the woman was married to the state and not to her husband.
right,
You had to like it was necessary to destroy to the extended family.
right. I think some of these things are purposeful directly, but I think to give people a bit of a break, there's a lot of, like, you look, think of the suburbs. The suburbs are basically created to build highways because they wanted to build highways to build more cars,
Mm.
because the car companies wanted to build more cars, but they needed more roads to drive more cars on. So they had to build highways, and that's kind of part of the project, right? So you can put the blame, let's say, you can scapegoat anyone along that process, but everything happened so organically that it just became the thing it became because there was avarice, there was, pick your passion, um, all operating at the same time. Also, but under this idea that hey, this is a great thing, this is new, look what we're doing. Again, it's this civilizational thing that we have to, you know, you need a strong, what I'm calling a regio, which is region, ruler, and religion, holding these things together as sort of almost a shit test. Like, someone comes like, "Hey, this is a great new idea," and you're like, "Wait a minute, let's calm down. Let's think about this." Um, and is that a purpose process? No. Are there mistakes being made? Of course. But you got to be hopeful that we can actually learn from previous mistakes as these things kind of undo themselves. I don't know where I'm standing nowadays. I don't know, maybe because Lent's been kicking my ass. I was thinking about this talk. I was preparing for us talking. Can sometimes you run through conversations, and I run through conversations.
I do too. Yeah.
Okay, so there we go. We're weird together.
Yeah.
And one of the
And
things
I
I
knew
was
you
going
were going to
to
say that. No, I'm just playing.
say, boo. Uh, one of the things I was thinking about saying to you is like I finally understand being world weary. That phrase, like that's kind of how I feel. I feel very world weary right now. Like I look at the world and myself in it and all that stuff. I'm like, man, all right, it's just a lot. It's a lot. It's a lot of a lot,
Mm, mm,
on the micro and the macro. So it's easy to get overcome with it. But I think that's to go back to community, which is what you want to talk about. Starting small, I think, is the key. When we start to think too big, I think this is where ideologies get it wrong too. They're thinking for this complete and total system somehow, and it's just too much. Like make it work on this in the smallest unit possible, and then make it work in a slightly bigger unit and a slightly bigger unit, and
mm.
and make it work on all levels, and then maybe you get a chance to take it to each progressive level.
Right.
And if there's a problem at any point, then you can go, okay, what's the problem? What's happening? Why isn't it working?
Mm. One of the things I've noticed that I find to be telling, and I think it's where the West actually went wrong. It's where it was like the beginning of the end at this point, if you really trace things back. And it's one of those small things that I've never heard anybody have a conversation about. But back in the day, like towns, like villages, were built, the communities were built around the church. And so people
Mm.
would look back and they'll look at these like exuberant churches that are just massive and beautiful, and all the homes around them are like tiny and small. They think, well, that shows how greedy the church was. But that's not what it's showing, actually. That shows how important the church was, that the people were investing their money into that church to build this massive cathedral to God. And then they were building their village around that church. And in the West, we started building the capitals, and we built around the capitals. And everything began to get built around the capitals. Because if you look at like the beginning of the United States, when there was like just 13 colonies, many of the communities that were segregated by religion, whether it would be Lutheran or Catholic or Protestant or whatever. They would self-segregate into these communities, and they would build their community around that identity, right? But then I guess it's somewhere around like post Civil War, probably. I would imagine that everything was starting to be built around the Capitol, and the Capitol was the most important building within the city limits and within the structure of the community. and and we're seeing this like really manifest itself with politics and ideology, the way that it's working now, that everybody's at each other's throat over ideology. And it's not to say that it's the first time in history it's ever happened, but if you're watching, like, all the struggles are about controlling that central mark, that capital is if you can control that capital, like let's say Portland is not a huge area of Oregon, but there's a massive concentration of people in Portland that basically control the politics of the entirety of Oregon. But if you get outside of that major city, the people outside of that major city have no interest in what that city is doing. They're like, this does not represent who we are. Right. And so the dynamics of it, instead of falling into a hierarchy in which there's something greater above us that we're all centralized around, we're centralizing around this man-made structure, this man-made capital that is run by men, that is designed by men, and that is the religion of the day, right?
Yeah,
It's
it's,
Go
it's
ahead, I'm
the
sorry.
no, it's I think you're describing the problem of materialism over um, metaphysics, right? Like, so God is a metaphysic. Christ is the point that we are always working towards but never achieving, which gives us something to always do. Um, thinking something that I talked about with Oren yesterday is that as these DR ideas are being uploaded to the main, and we're seeing more and more people, mostly conservatives right now, but I think you'll start seeing some even liberals come over to these ideas, um, because it's new. It's fresh. It's like the first time you ever heard Yarvin, or you have to kind of think of that, like, ooh, um, and it's dangerous and forbidden and all those things. But once we have these guys over, let's say more or less, and they've accepted at least part of the ideas, it's like, well, what do you do with all these people? Like, where do you direct them? How do you? Because all this stuff has really been we've been doing a lot of theory selling for 10 years, which is great. But if all we want to do is just make more content, well, sure. But I think that a podcast really isn't even a podcast. A podcast is a vehicle for connection,
Mm.
um, like all media really is. And now that we have this technology in our living room or office, and the fact that I can stream live and have 100 or 1,000 or whatever people tuning in and talking directly, and I can respond to them in real time. This creates a trinity out of McEwen's idea that the medium is a message, and I'm saying that the media, and that's true. It was true when the medium was a singular thing, right? Like very true with print, extremely true with, like, let's say radio. It gets a little bit more murky with TV and movies, because what is you can do certain things that you couldn't do with the other mediums, but
Mm.
still very true. You get to the internet. Well, what is this medium? It's everything and nothing at the same time. So what really becomes clear to me is that what in McEwen's media science, they talk about the audience as, one term I've heard used is the phantom. So the audience is assumed. We no longer have to make the assumption of the audience. We can deal directly with them. So now, with that trinity of the medium, message, and connection, we realize that really what we're doing here in many ways is building connections. And the question then, of course, is connecting us to what?
Right.
What to do what? And again, we go back to the church. Well, what is a church? Other than let's Christian stuff aside, like functionality, like brass tacks. What is it? What is it? What does it do? Right. Well, it brings people together. It brings that left and right together. It brings people together to, if if you're someone who needs to imbue to feel part of something, we have the Eucharist. If you're someone who needs to build or materialize to feel part of it, we have the icons, right? There are all these things that combine these people and give them purpose. Redemption gives us purpose.
Mm.
So now we know what to do. And I think that solves for a lot of these things. Now, how do you onboard all these Western people who are fallen, have quite fallen people in a very fallen land, back to the church? I don't. That's above my pay grade. But I think it has to be. It comes upon us, people like us. That's kind of, I think, I, I I've been accused of, of preaching in the past, and I
Mm.
don't want to preach to anyone. I don't think I was put on this earth to convert people. At the same time, I think I should. I think I have some onus upon me, some responsibility to direct, and simply say, this is the way, because you have to be, because you have to do something. So what are you going to do? And I think, like you said, let's take a town, let's revitalize the church as the center, let's build out from around it, let's give something a generational, let's give a whole bunch of people a generational purpose, which is bigger than, you know I hate the Jews, or damn the Republicans, or damn, fuck, shut up. Like,
Right.
enough,
Yeah.
right?
Well, because everybody's like the way people are connected right now is being against things and not being for things. And that's
Mm.
just that's a negative way of living your life, right? If you're solely consumed with negative thoughts about about certain things, and all of the people that you engage with and that you are connected to are solely consumed with the negativity of being against that thing, then you are devoured by that thing, and that thing owns you, right? It's like, I remember like one time, I probably heard something somewhere that triggered this thought, but I remember like after my first divorce, man, I was so bitter. I was so angry. I felt so betrayed, right? And at some point, I came to the realization that I think about this and I'm giving this person ownership over me, and they don't even
Mhm.
care. It doesn't matter. They're not even giving a second thought to what happened. And I am like just stewing on it and brooding in it. And it's controlling my every thought, my every action, my moods, and all this. And I'm giving this person much more power over me than they deserve. Right. And that's kind of what politics has
Mhm.
turned into. And and you're probably right. It probably is something as simple as metaphysics versus materialism, but the symbolism of the center of your society being built around a governing body as opposed to the body of Christ, I think says a lot symbolically about where your society is sitting, where your civilization is going.
Yeah, it's interesting. You have the recent event of the American Congress passing that massive aid bill to Ukraine that's cemented into 2025. So, Trump wins, he couldn't stop it.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, they would be able to
and
impeach
this
him
is
if he tried to put an end to it. Yeah.
yeah, and all this stuff. And reading the headlines and stuff, it's interesting to me. Some people are saying this, but very few are touching on the fact that everyone's talking about like generational debt and how this is screwing up the American economy and so on and so forth, and its betrayal. But it's like your government, and I'm not saying your government, but let's say the Western governments
Mm.
are committed to keeping this war going, even though it's going to probably end in every single last Ukrainian living there being dead.
Hmm.
Like if this keeps going the way it's
Maybe
going,
not every one of them, but all the males for
yeah, well,
sure.
I should say that not every single woman and child, but they're putting women in on the front lines too now.
Yeah.
So there won't be any
Well, and
Ukrainians left
didn't Lindsey Graham say that? Like this, like we'll fund this war,
to the very last
to the
Ukrainian.
very
Yeah,
last. Yeah, yeah. And that, I mean, they
yeah,
openly
but
have
even
said this.
yeah, and it's an ethnic cleanse,
It is an ethnic,
and it's being
and it's
done. It's
absolutely evil.
yeah, it's being done it's being done in your name.
Mm. Yeah.
So I'm not telling you what to get upset about. I'm just
Mm.
simply saying if you're going to get upset about something, I
Right.
would say that the money thing. I mean, the money thing is mashugana anyways. Like I don't know. I don't even know what funny thing they're doing now. I think a lot of people are considering it's going to be a big run on Bitcoin. All the major Bezos and Thiel and a few others have all sold off mass amounts of shares and then no one knows what they're going to do with it. The speculation is it's all going to be Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is going to be this parallel economy, and I don't know things. Maybe, quite possibly.
Hmm.
Um, but uh, on a moral line, yeah, you should be more upset that your government, and I'm just saying yours. Just I'm caveating that because I don't want people to say, "Well, your government's doing it too." I'm like, yes,
Yeah.
right, yeah,
Yeah.
um,
We're
yeah,
not arguing about this.
yeah, you're right. Yes,
Yeah.
good. Uh, is continuing basically an ethnic cleanse because they're pushing these people into a war they can't win, and Russia's in a position where they can't back down. So,
Well, and they're doing it to enrich themselves and their
sure,
political donors. I mean, that's
yep,
what it all boils down to. They don't care how many people die in the name of them getting rich. They just don't
yep,
care. And I feel like more so now than ever before, it's much more blatant. It's much more blatant because they're out there saying, oh, well, this money's never going to make it to the Ukraine. We're going to send Ukraine equipment valued at this much money, and then we're going to give this money directly to Boeing and Lockheed Martin and these weapons manufacturers, and they're going to vamp our stockpile. And it's like, okay, why are we giving Ukraine these weapons just so more Ukrainians can die? Well, they were going to expire in the next couple of years anyway, and we were going to have to do away with them anyway. Oh, so you'd rather they were used to kill people than that they just get thrown away, that they just get exposed of, just get done with. And uh, it's just very blatant. They're very open about it now. Now we're just going to give this money to American jobs, American run businesses, and these are the same American businesses that fund our campaigns and that pay us for giving them more subsidies so that they can create more weapons, so that there can be more war and more people can die.
Here's the bitter white pill with all that too, though. The money, the people they're giving all that money to are now are the companies that are getting hit by the competency crisis the hardest. Boeing has had 2/3 of their engineering core either retire or in the process of early retirement because inflation has hit their retirement packages.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of guys did the math and said, whoa, whoa, whoa. If I don't retire to this year, I think it's this year, 2024, early 25,
Mm-hmm.
um, I will be working for free for parts of my retirement. So no, fuck that, we're out.
Mm-hmm.
Contract us. So 2/3, something like that, of Boeing's engineering core is either gone or going. In a company that really kind of heavily relies on engineering, it's not the stewardesses that are going to be running Boeing. It's like the engineers are kind of important in an aerospace freaking industry. And you go down the line. Something that Oren said in our talk is that people, when they hear competency crisis, they use it, and they think that the elites are immune to this thing somehow,
Mm.
and they're not. The planes fall out of the sky over DC too, so I don't know if they're just if the Saturday morning cartoon version of this event is that they're hoarding all the hyper competent people in a bunker somewhere, and they're just gonna I don't know, like
No,
this,
this is how
it's
this is how you get to idiocracy.
yes,
it's I
yep,
mean,
exactly.
that's what they were describing. They were describing that slow burn of the competency crisis. Eventually, it touches everybody.
Hmm. Yeah, the IQ shredder is real.
Hmm.
And I would counter it saying somewhat with saying that I actually don't think we have a competency crisis the way we think we do. We have an investment crisis. We have a capital investment crisis. If we're saying again, going back to capital as competency, these two
Hmm.
things are, let's say, intertwined.
Hmm.
And we say that capital doesn't always have to be money, but it can be metaphysical. It can be everything, like social capital. We use the term. No one really knows what the hell that is. Um, it's more like the will or the ability to get something done kind of thing. But inside of that is that admission that you have to in order to get something done, you have to be able to know how to do it, and you have to be able to be competent doing it on some level. So I don't think we have a true competency crisis. We have a demographic crunch. So we're going to have less and less native born people who have all the advantages of native born person, which is language and knowledge of the geography and just general give a shit about the country itself,
Hmm.
and and in general higher IQs in general, if you want to believe in the IQ thing. But the other big thing is that we have a whole bunch of young men, and this isn't slagging on video games, but they're playing video games instead of learning how to do trades.
Hmm.
Um, because or playing on Twitch instead of doing other jobs because the other jobs suck and Twitch pays just as well, with the promise of paying
Right.
infinite money, right?
Right.
So those guys could be funneled into something and could be made competent on a, let's say, civilizational level pretty easily, I think. But there's no incentive for them at the moment.
Right.
And I think it'll take things really collapsing in real time to where you wake up and you go to the supermarket and the supermarket's not there anymore. It's a big chain, and the big change is gone. You're like, what do you mean? They're like, well, they went bankrupt.
Mm.
What do you mean they went? What? Like, I don't know what would be a big, like, imagine if Walmart just didn't
Walmart, yeah.
exist. Yeah, if Walmart just didn't exist tomorrow. I'm not saying this is going to happen, but you get my drift,
Right.
right? You're going to go to Walmart to get your thing, and you go there and it's gone, or it's the building's there. It's like a blockbuster.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, right.
They came in the middle
Radio
of the night and
Radio
took
Shack, it just kind of disappears one day.
right. I think you're going to start seeing that
One we've seen
rapidly.
we've been seeing it gradually, like slowly happening. Like you mentioned Blockbuster, I mentioned Radio Shack. We had what was it a couple of years ago? It was Sears,
Mhm.
and
Yeah,
Kmart.
the Bay was a big one in Canada. Yeah,
Hmm. Yeah.
yeah.
So you've been witnessing it, and you know, we put a lot of that up to the fact of like explosions like Amazon and
Mhm.
online stores like that, but that's not the entire story behind it, you know.
No,
And
it's just financing and care. Like, people didn't want to work there anymore,
right.
right? And so you're the only people who you're going to get to work there are of lesser and lesser quality, right? And people don't think of retail people as quality. It's like, yeah, there's quality within everything. Just care, like the care to do inventory correctly. Instead of just going "Meh," and throwing away, and then your inventory is all out, and then no one knows what to order, and the ordering's all out, and like all these things cascade.
Mm,
And and if you work in places like that, I work at I won't dox myself, but I work at a thing, and I do inventory control, and it's an important part of the job because like
yep.
if the inventory is off, it fucks everything up,
Yeah,
right?
risk management, loss prevention, these are often overlooked positions that are very important to the retail.
I mean, the other scary thing is that I have multiple messages coming in from people for the last few months telling me stories about uh, let's say critical industries that their safety department has like three guys, and two of them are retiring,
Mm.
and like literally the instruction manual is a handwritten thing pasted on a board. Like, if
Yeah.
the generator blows up, here's what you do. Like, shit, on an oil rig or something like that.
Yeah,
Like,
right.
and
Well, hold on, I got to get
what?
to the break room so I know what to do.
Right? Yeah. What does this manual say? Like, this is not the time to be reading a manual. Like,
Yeah, right.
uh, but it's scary. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. And the planes thing is the bridge.
Mm.
Sorry, this is blackpilling as fuck, right, guys? I'm sorry. We'll get to the good stuff. Don't worry. There's hope at the end of the tunnel. There's light at the end of this tunnel. We'll build towards it.
You wanna
And
take a break for a second? I gotta hit the restroom.
yeah, let's go take a break and have a
Let
smoke.
you have a smoke, and I'll use the bathroom, and we'll be right back. See, y'all didn't even notice we were gone. It's that
Magic.
that easy.
Where were we?
We were talking about the
Oh, bridges,
competency
bridges,
crisis, bridges,
bridges falling over. Yeah.
planes, and I mean, and when we've seen this with Boeing here recently too, that taking all the shortcuts, you had the whistleblower that was, you know, suicided, um,
Mhm.
and we're witnessing the devastation, the destruction of these industries.
Yeah, in rapid time.
Mm.
Everything's happened slowly and then it happens all at once.
Hmm.
I feel like we're reaching the happening all at once phase. I mean, there's a lot of hope in terms of when you think of what's going. You see, if you become myopic, it becomes really blackpilling. If you extend out, things get a lot more hopeful ish. Um, One of the things that when Matt Erickson over at Kingpill was doing the PayPal Mafia tours, one of the things when we were talking about these things, we started looking into was these. They have different names. Trump has been calling, says he wants to do freedom cities. in the United States. There's ones going on in, they're basically investment cities. Let's call it that way. Like they're almost civilizational capital things going on. In Honduras, it's called Prospera. There's a whole bunch of them spring up over in Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And these are sort of like, I think they're looking at civilization as a startup, and using the startup model. It's very Yarvin patchwork. That's why Matt and I were doing that patchwork reading series, which we have to get back to. But um, we're starting to see that come on board, like people who've read them and said, okay, how do we apply this? And they're starting to do it in places. So it's not that this is all going to go away and it's going to be some wasteland fallout thing. It's more that I think it's closer to what Cyprian was talking about with the dim age, where we're going to enter a period of time where, at least on a technological level, we're going to stagnate a bit. On a, let's say, a civilizational level, we're going to stagnate a bit. But there's other sectors that are certainly growing. You look at
Well,
what
I would even say that it's beyond stagnate. It's almost like like reversion, right?
yeah.
And okay, so follow, see if you can follow this and tell me what you think about this, okay? Because all right, so have you ever read Renegade History of the United States by Thaddeus Russell? Did you ever read that book?
No, I'm aware of it though.
It was an interesting book, and he had some really interesting facts in there. Even, he's a lefty, but he's a nice guy. I know that, like I don't have anything against him. He said some stupid shit, but other than that, like I don't really have anything personally against
He
him.
has said some epically stupid shit.
So, but personally, I don't have anything against that. I like
Sure.
him. He's a nice guy, Um, but so in that book, he talks about prohibition and why prohibition was actually such a big push. And it was a push because the corporations lobbied the United States government to for prohibition of alcohol because their employees would go to lunch and they'd have a few beers and they'd come back and they'd be drunk and they wouldn't show up on Fridays because they'd be drinking, or they'd be drinking at the warehouse or whatever.
Mhm.
And so there was this high number of people that were like seriously like drunk during the day at work, and it was causing issues within the corporate structure of profits and all the stuff. There, it was all affected by this cultural dynamic of where drinking throughout the day was just a norm, and it's just the way that people lived, especially the Irish, back then. And I don't know where that trope came from, but so I'm
Look,
looking.
I just to jump in for a second, I see a lot of merit in this. I believe if I could get away with it, I would do it. Do the exact same thing. I believe in living in a world of round corners. So
Well, in South Africa they do this, right? So like when Beatrix, she would go to work, all through the week, and then on Fridays at lunch, the office would go have lunch together and they'd all have a couple of drinks and then go back to work. It was a very normal thing, and it's very normal in like European cultures for these things to take
in
place.
Montreal, Montreal. This happens all the time. Yeah.
Right. So it's very normal in a lot of places, but in the United States, it's a no-go. You don't do that. And so when I'm looking at, like, you're talking about the kids turning to Twitch streaming and blah blah blah, I'm kind of looking at that same kind of dynamic where it's kind of like this reversion back to, there are things more important to me than working. There are things
Mhm.
that I'd rather have a good time and blah blah blah, and whatever work I get done, but I'm going to have fun before I'm worried about working. It's kind of like a reversion to that, right? And I look at like the trend with OnlyFans and girls, you know, instead of going to college, instead of entering the workforce, they're going to OnlyFans to make money. So you're having less women go into the field of service, whether it's waitressing or nursing or it's whatever it may be. because they're reverting to OnlyFans. And I see this kind of like as the reemergence of the whorehouse, so to speak.
Mhm.
Right. And so you kind of get, I'm kind of seeing what I'm picturing or I'm envisioning as a reversion and kind of a turning, regression back to past habits, past actions, maybe not in the exact same way, but there's this mirroring or this shadowing, kind of a whisper of the past entering in. And so you're seeing these dynamics where it's killing this kind of puritanical culture. It's kind of killing the ultra feminist kind of culture by these women saying, no, I don't mind being a sex object. I don't mind if men just look at me as a sex object because I'm making all this money. Right.
Yeah, I think as a counterbalance to that too, what I'm seeing is sort of the rise of what I call them the neo trads, and now you're seeing big name OnlyFans girls, like I think her name is Nala, going on
Oh, is she the one?
Knowles,
Yeah. Michael J. Knowles show.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
and basically becoming born again. I'm not sure what her faith is. I'm assuming some sort of mushy evangelical
I think the
thing.
name of the episode was From OnlyFans to Christian, probably some
Yeah,
sort of Protestant. I mean, I'm guessing.
something.
Yeah.
I'm guessing. I'm guessing born again. I think you're going to see a lot of that. I think the evangelicals are going to have um, um, a bigger recruitment than even the Orthodox within the male sphere. But that's regardless.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm starting to see is so Rene Girard always talks about desires, right? Desires are external from us. We model, or we don't know what to want until other people want it. And one of the desires I think is being that started in, I guess, 2021 or 2022, when you started seeing these articles about COVID and people who had really been wholehearted into the COVID regime, asking for forgiveness and saying that we need to forgive each other and all this other stuff. And I started reading those articles, and from a Girardian lens, it's like, okay, so people want redemption. There's a call out for a desire for redemption, but there's no ideology currently that offers that. The only thing they can do then is to turn to the church. And but given that this current situation is how it is, Father Turbo Quails once said that a lot of guys get males especially join the Orthodox Church um, because they say, well, you guys are against all the things we don't like, and then they get in there and realize that the church is also against them.
Yeah.
that actually it's like, no, you're the problem that you got to fix. And that's usually when people drop out because they're like, whoa, I didn't know I have to do something about me. I thought
Right.
it was all about them.
Well, and
Um,
doing something about you is the hard part.
well, it's the necessary part, right? So, 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 anyways, I'm starting to see this trend, and you're seeing with fashion first because usually that's the most obvious thing. Headscarves are coming back in.
Hmm.
Um, I predict you saw all these traditional cooking shows that are like getting millions and millions of views on Instagram. Like that's the trend, right?
Hmm.
You're going to start seeing more and more of that as these women specifically start to wake up and go, okay, this is not fulfilling either. The OnlyFans experience, the whoring experience, all that stuff is not fulfilling either.
Right.
I still can't find a mate. I'm still feeling empty, and women are the vibe barometers. So they're going to start seeking redemption, and men will have to figure that out as well. And then when you couple that in with this idea of the vengeful son, there's a spirit of identifying a betrayal, a generational betrayal, and being angry about it. This is a bitch's brew, I think,
Hmm.
because now what I think you'll start seeing is this idea of a revitalization of the empire, of true American empire. I think this will be the birthplace of an age of empires that'll come probably after we're gone, but it'll be that sense of ultra masculinity of like, I think things are going to get, because things are being so muddled. Um, it's now going to um, it's now going to diversify pretty starkly,
Right.
and but this is not putting the woke away. I think a lot of that same principles will be now redeemed in some way, but just given a different facade. So,
Well,
you
yeah,
know, it's like Dave Rubin will be, you know, sensible gay men, no more big giant pride with
right.
the guys in dog collars. It's going to be Dave Rubin's and sensible sweater vests buying children, you know.
Yeah. Well, and the more that people fall into like there people are going to continue to experiment in an attempt to find meaning and in an attempt to find purpose. And the more that they fall flat on their face in these attempts, the less choices they're left with, and eventually they're just left there looking into this void, and they turn around and it's the church right behind them, right? Whether it's
Well, and this is
orthodoxy or Protestantism, like something's they're going to find their way back to that. So I think that's kind of what you're getting at, right?
and this is why I think what we have to do, you, me, others of our ilk, is to embody and model the prodigal son.
Mm,
That's our journey, by the way, right?
mm.
You and I, just to take the two of us, are men who turn from the church in our pride, who turn from the Father in our pride and our haughtiness and our desire to say, no, I will strike out in the world. I will be the man,
I'm
right?
going out there to conquer. Yeah.
Right. And then doing your stuff and at one point realizing like, no, I'm bankrupt. Like
Yeah, I can't
uh
do it on my own.
I can't do it on my own. I'm too ashamed to return to the Father, and then meeting the Father again on the road and having the Father embrace us
Mm.
and realizing in that moment that just gives me chills.
Right,
Like
me too.
there's that humbling of
Mm,
love of the Father. Now, if we begin to model and present ourselves as the prodigal sons, right, as a counterbalance to the vengeful son,
right.
the hope I have is that those who follow in our footsteps will become the redeeming father, because the prodigal son who models the father becomes the redeeming father.
Yes.
Does that make
Yeah. And this
sense?
is yeah, and this has been something that's been bothering me. Okay. So like let's see if this follows with where you're going. One of the things that I got like super excited about, and I was kind of like, I think I was like ortho curious at the time. I hadn't like gone to the church yet, but I see the flaws in the details of the way this took place, but it was like GameStop, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was like the vengeful son. Because you would hear
Mm-hmm.
people say, like, no, I don't care if you take all my money. I don't care if I lose it all because I'm after you. I want you to lose all your money because I saw what you did to my parents in 2008. You know, that
Mm-hmm.
type of like idea. And so, yeah, we've seen this taking place and it feels good to cheer for those people. But at some point we have to step back and say, but that's not the right way. That's not the royal path. We're
Mm-hmm.
going to have to set an example for these people to see there's another way.
Yeah, and you know, with the game stonks one, it's easy to feel good about them because of their targets, but you also have to remember that those hedge funds. Now, I'll speak carefully here because I'm not exactly sure of every single person who was invested in that hedge fund,
Mm,
but there was definitely some innocent guys there who had their 401ks involved in that,
right.
right? Who lost money as well. So it's not. It's easy to say, well, the Wall Street guy, fuck him, and let's
Mm-hmm.
bleed him,
Right.
right? And perhaps with good moral certainty. But what of all the other people who are connected to that guy, who did nothing wrong, who
Mm-hmm.
just did who did the sensible thing that their banker, investment banker, was telling them to do, and then didn't realize that all this other stuff is going on,
Right.
right? Like they're not involved in those decision makings at all. Like, and now maybe that's a good wake up call for them to choose more ethical, blah, 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 blah. Sure, but in the short term, they got screwed too.
Yeah.
So this is what I'm saying, that the issue of the vengeful son is this idea of total violence. It'll be a totalizing violence, not just kinetic. It'll be violence on all fronts.
Mm-hmm.
The danger of it is, yes, it will feel good, but the limitations of humanity is always that we don't understand our consequences. We can't. We're finite thinking people.
Mm-hmm.
We use tradition in the church to understand certain consequences, things that have been played out. I was like, don't do this. Why? Shut up. Just don't. Like, don't stop asking questions. Just don't do the thing. Because if you do the thing, and you're like, well, we're going to do the thing. And like, okay. And you do the thing, and then you get Sodom and fucking Gomorrah, right? Like
Right.
2.0. And you're like, oh shit, how did we get here? Because you did the thing. You did the thing that we told you not to do. So, yeah, there's all that. But the danger of it, of course, is yes, it will feel good when the people that we can easily point out as monsters get destroyed or whatever, um, put back on the fringes, as Peugeot would say, return the monsters back to the monster land.
Mm-hmm.
So the issue is that then we become the monsters, and to get a little Nietzschean on that, but that is always the danger. And by instigating that and by championing that, we don't fix the situation. We don't reinvert it. We just continue it.
Mm.
And what happens after the vengeful and an inversion? I don't. Maybe that is Antichrist. I don't know. Right. So that's what I'm saying is that what comes upon us is to be the prodigal son, and to model the prodigal son in our shows and in our life and all that stuff.
Mm.
And to do that as clearly and as to our best of our ability. And in doing that, hopefully what we do is we reinvert this world into a proper sphere, right, which I think begins with the redemption, right? It has to come. What people want it. People want redemption. They just don't know where to get it.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to be able to present redemption to them in a clear, present way that, it's going to be challenging, but I think that's where do we build community? Well, we build a community of redemption, build a community of sacrifice,
right?
Redeem the idea of sacrifice, even that sacrifice can be meaningful and good. That isn't. It's not just sacrificing for your. Don't just join the army and get killed for your country, who's obviously corrupt and doing corrupt things. That doesn't mean that going to war is necessarily bad. There are just causes for certain things, but everything's in its place. And anyways, I don't know where I'm going with that, but I think you get the gist.
I do. Give me 1 second. I'm gonna let these dogs out because they're going crazy.
I'm not sure if I'm supposed to be filling time here. Like and subscribe, folks. Make sure you like and subscribe to Tommy Simon's podcast, Year Zero. Make sure you promote it to all your friends. Get it out there. Get some BBC in your mouth. The Fox and Sons coffee.
Silly ass. I open the door to let him go outside, and he runs outside, and then he follows me all the way back to the office. Thought you wanted to go outside, dude. Well, I did until you let me outside. Now I want to see what you're doing. But yeah, and that's a big concern, man. And I think that's kind of the tension that we all feel kind of in the air. We know that that these things are going on, that there's this potential for violence at any given moment. We saw the summer of Floyd and the way that took off. And if that vengeful son comes back to try to get revenge on the devouring mother, which, if you ask me, like, the summer of Floyd was the ultimate spirit of the devouring mother. And so if that vengeful son like comes back to get revenge, it's going to get really ugly. It's going to be really nasty for a whole lot of people. And there's going to be a whole lot of innocent people that get caught up in that, like you're saying.
I mean, one of the dark visions of this, I'll be careful what I say because I don't know where you're putting this up, is
everywhere but think, YouTube. I'm not allowed on YouTube anymore.
Okay, well, there you go. I think if this continues the way I'm seeing things continue, by 2025, you're going to start seeing politicians, let's say elites, get dragged out in the street and shot. Like, it's going to get third world. Things that you see happening, you see videos of it, like, Mogadishu in the 1980s or whatever it was.
Mm,
things like that, right? And you look and go, wow, that's awful. Ooh, that doesn't happen here. It's like, oh, it's going to be happening
mm,
here. People are, I think it happens whether, no matter who wins this election. um I think by 2025 things kick off, and it's that's why I'm trying to increase the messaging here, um because, and not just for, like I don't care, like take it, do what you want, like don't attach my name to it, I don't care,
mm.
because I think honestly the way I'm seeing it, it's very important that people get their shit together. Again, to quote Cyprian, choose your king now, right now, and get good with God. Because if you don't, you're going to be directed that way,
Hmm.
and that way is going to get ugly. It's
Hmm.
going to get ugly for everything, but it's going to get real ugly for people on that side, because you're going to get recruited into a very vengeful army of men who begin to tear things down.
Right.
And
And
God,
it's hard for people to wrap their minds around that there's a possibility of something like this taking place,
mm,
because they go out into their lives, their everyday lives, and it all functions the same. They get up, they drink their coffee, they go to work, they come home, they eat dinner, they go to bed, right? And their lives are so mundane. But it's like whenever Tim Pool did he did a podcast, he had Eric Prince on, which I don't listen to Tim Pool very often, but I thought it would
mm,
be interesting to hear what Eric Prince had to say. Um, Given as he was the head of Blackwater for so long, and he said it's very interesting whenever you see these countries that get like devoured by civil war. Everything's normal one day, and then the next day the water's off, the lights are off, the internet's not working, and it's just overnight. It just happens in at the blink of the eye. And you have to fortify yourself in some way. Now, I'm not saying like I don't mean this like when Tim Pool talks about this. I know he talks about it from a kind of a prepper aspect, but I'm not talking about it from a prepper aspect. I'm talking about it from fortifying yourself spiritually, mentally, and making sure your relationships are healthy.
mm.
Because having those relationships in that community, which is ultimately what we've been talking about, is very important. You want to have those ties that ground you, that bring you joy, even during the darkest of times.
Yeah, I think that's a good place to wrap it up too. But why community? And you know, shout out to, again, Matt Erickson at Kingpill. Everyone should join the Kingpill Discord, because there's a community being built there, and it's kind of beta testing something that Matt and I are talking about. I won't get spoiled too much, but we have this amazing gift of the internet. The frontier spirit, let's say, which gave way to the revolutionary spirit, can be breathed into life again on the internet, because this is infinite space. We haven't even cracked. We're on the shoreline,
Mm-hmm.
um, and so something for your listeners to think about, mine as well. But digital communities, and I know there's been a lot of talk about that kind of stuff. Um, but purposeful communities, people that are, we can gather together in this digital space, and then map that into meat space. And there's an alchemical formula here, and that's kind of where civilizational capital comes in, as a formalization kind of white paper thing to think about. But those two things, I think, have to start happening.
So it's like kind of
And
like a digital free state project kind of deal.
yeah, exactly. And the,
Okay.
the good thing about this is your startup cost is almost zero,
Mm.
right? You can do it on your phone. You can,
Yeah,
there's,
you're basically already paying for it today.
right,
Yeah.
right. So let's say your startup cost is effectively zero. The only thing that really is required of you is your time and energy, time and attention.
Mm-hmm.
Which, as I'm saying, like, if you can't give me money, give me your time and attention. It's much more valuable.
Mm.
And hopefully, what we start to do is build all these online communities, and find ways of developing them faster and quicker, and then start to use that to invest in meat space areas because there's tons of towns out there. Just in the continental United States, you can do a quick search of old mining towns or company towns or steelwork towns where you could buy up the land for, I mean, I think it's like somewhere between $2 and $10 million or something like that. It just
Mm.
depends on how big the place is. Now you have to have constant money to invest in the project. It's not like just you buy it and then magic happens. But in terms of buying up real estate, it's cheap, relatively. And then you own a town. And what can you do with a town? Well, what can't you do with a town? Maybe start from there, right? Like
Yeah.
what like let your imagination go wild. If nothing else, it's a fun little project, and I think I find it very hopeful. Uh, and if this is all going down, and bad things are starting to happen, then wouldn't it be better to have community groups of people together in areas where they can at least generationally hold out and hopefully wait for the floodwaters to recede.
Mm.
So, you know, that's that's the teaser project that we're working on. But again, go over and join up to the King Hill Discord. Um, I'm very happy to be a member there, and also that I don't have to do it. Matt manages that thing, so I can just I just show up and drop a few bombs in the VC and get pissy and then walk out.
Well, all right, man. We'll plug away.
2-Bit Podcast is the name of the channel. We have one show going on. I have one show going on. It's an interview show on Fridays, interview dialogue conversation show called At the End of the Day. That's at Fridays at 6 p.m. Eastern. Starting May 2nd of 2024, I'm bringing in a new show called Meet the Based. It's going to be like Meet the Pressed, but based. It'll be a panel show where we talk to a few interesting people from our side of the internet about some notable news items, and of course, whatever they're working on as well. I think the lineup for the episode 1 is going to be LB Muniz, Thomas77, who else is confirmed? Dimes from Blood Satellite podcast, and I'm waiting to hear back from one or two others. So we'll see. But otherwise, it's going to be a good one. And that'll be a weekly show on Thursdays, I believe, around 8:30 p.m., 8:39 p.m. What else? We're on the podcatchers. I've been really lazy on Spotify. I'm sorry. But if you listen to audio, there'll be more. I'm going to be like mass uploading a whole bunch of stuff. Apologies. Lent. Not to blame everything on Lent, because that's not good. But that's probably a heresy. But Lent. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, it could break you.
I don't know how these vegans do it. I don't.
It's not the food that bothers me. It's like I don't care.
It's the just general haziness and weakness of just like feeling like.
Well, I lived on ramen noodles for years, so I don't care. It doesn't bother me. Like I'll eat whatever. I can eat anything. And
no, it's the food doesn't bother me. The actual food doesn't bother me. It's the effect. Like it's when you're feeling fuzzy and weak, and you're like, I could just fix this with a steak. Like I eat one steak and I'm good. I'm back. I'm back, baby.
The natural fats and proteins and stuff like that. Yeah. Well, and that's Beatrix found this shake, this protein shake that she makes for me, which is it's delicious. I'll send you the link for the cookbook she's put together. Maybe that'll help because we do a lot of beans and stuff like that, like lentil tacos and stuff like that. There's a lot of good stuff that we do. So I'll send you the link to that cookbook. But the shakes in there, and it's dates, bananas, almonds, pistachios, and cashews with almond milk, and it's awesome, and it's a great way to start your day.
You say all that stuff and it's all things I like, but I'm also like, that's just some runny shits, man. My shits are just so runny.
Just eat a piece of lettuce when you're done.
People things they don't. Hey man, this is something that your priest is going to tell you when you're on Lent. It's like you're going to go through some really weird shits. Like some of them are going to be super hard and dense because you're eating too much beans and fucking like eating way too much fucking carbs. You got to calm down on that. So you switch up to other things, and now it's just like I have diarrhea all the time. Fantastic. Look at
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, just avoid. She has a whole area of the cookbook dedicated to Indian food. Just avoid that because I know how you feel about Indian food. But other than that, you should be good.
It's not food.
All right,
It's
man.
not.
I hear you, but I love it. She makes such a good curry, man. But
I'm sure baby food is great too. I just don't dine on it.
all right, man. Well, I'm gonna stop the recording.